Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Back Four. I'm Sam Homewood, and as always joined by Kieran Maguire and Graeme Bailey. So what happened at the weekend? Well, Arsenal won again, composed and clinical. Liverpool, well, maybe the stuttering's finished because they also got a win, although Salah didn't look delighted to score, did he? And Manchester United are sort of back to form, drawing, which means that lad is never getting his haircut. Right, there's all of that to talk about, plus developments in the managerial positions at Wolves. Let's get right into it. Let's start with Arsenal. Graeme, the Arsenal Insider wrote an article that suggested, Steve Bruce said, that what Arteta's done with Declan Rice this season has changed everything for them. And that's the reason that Declan Rice is suddenly getting so many more goals, so many more assists, and is changing the way Arsenal are playing. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more like the West Ham version of Declan Rice, where he could get forward, etc. And the arrival of Zubimendi has been key to that. Zubimendi was always being brought in to play this talented number 6 role, the quarterback role, as it were. And we saw him do it for Spain, didn't we, in the last Euros, and he did it with great aplomb when everyone wondered, oh, how's Rodri going to be replaced? And it was Zubimendi, and he did it in fine style. And yeah, he's coming to Arsenal, he's fitted like a hand in a glove, and it goes back to their recruitment. Everything's working out really well. You know, they're without Martin Odegaard, who we've lavish praise on in recent episodes, but yeah, this whole squad at Arsenal is so deep. And Rice, yeah, to see Declan Rice step up, the fullbacks, it was great to see some of the media tagging on to our Calafiori and Timberline, which we ran a few weeks ago, that they're playing so well. But yeah, it wasn't an imperious performance, but it really did look like, to me, it just rang of it almost like a Sir Alex Ferguson Manchester United performance from back in the day, Sam, where they went there, as soon as they took the lead, they weren't getting beat, but they weren't overly negative. They just controlled the game from start to finish. And they do look like champions-elect to me. They really do look that good. They look like an absolute Rolls Royce at the minute, and they're not even out of first gear. They look so good at the minute.
I want to talk to Kieran about Declan Rice, but just quickly, because you said they don't look negative. Both Lee Dixon and Gary Neville, though, said in their assessment of the game that maybe this Arsenal team could be too cautious and they don't take enough risks. Do you think that's fair?
Possibly, but I think with that, they're getting used to playing with Gyökeres. Again, something we've alluded to in previous episodes, and they're just getting used to how he's played, running behind. But yeah, and obviously getting used to Eze when he's replacing Odegaard. They're just getting used to new players in the squad. I still think they could do with another left-sider. Did they go and look at a Rodrigo from Real Madrid in January, who's not very happy where he is? Is there that cherry on the top signing that Arsenal could still make? I think there is. But yeah, maybe a little bit over. I don't think they're too over negative, though, because I think they do like to get Calafiori forward when we see things. No, I just think they're not getting out first gear because they don't need to.
Kieran, so let's talk about Declan Rice and his £100 million price tag. Do players, because when we talk about it as fans, we talk about players as having to justify their price tag. In terms of a club's investment, do players have to do something to generate that money back, or is that not how clubs see it? And if that is the viewpoint, what is success for Declan Rice to have been worth £100 million?
Success for Declan Rice from Arsenal's perspective is for Arsenal to qualify on a regular basis for the Champions League. Winning the Premier League is for the fans. The additional money that you get, and I spoke to somebody at a club who said, actually, we'd rather finish second or third because the players get big bonuses for winning the Premier League. The football club gets an extra £3.5 million. So sometimes you might get some bonuses from sponsors, but sometimes not. So on that basis, I think it's been a spectacular success, the recruitment of Declan Rice, because Arsenal have gone from a club who, remember, they went from that period sort of 2016 onwards where they weren't qualifying for the Champions League. And what we also saw, as far as my spreadsheet was concerned, was that their commercial income was flatlining because the sponsors didn't want to get involved with Arsenal. They felt that they were being quoted too big a price for not enough return and not enough exposure. So it's been a fantastic signing. From a financial point of view, you spread it over the life of the contract, so it's 20 million a year in terms of amortized cost. You get a minimum of 40 million in terms of prize money from UEFA itself for qualifying for the Champions League, plus under the expanded Swiss model, Arsenal are probably making somewhere in the region of 6 to 7 million in gate receipts from each Tuesday or Wednesday night. Again, when you talk to my fellow nerds who work in commercial departments, they say this is fantastic. It was actually quite tricky when Arsenal were only qualifying for the Europa League or conference. If you're trying to sell a box and you've got Cyprus's third best team coming to the Emirates on a Thursday evening, you have to drop your price or you don't sell. Champions League, it sells itself. So the investment has more than paid off through the finances. Clearly, there's more than one player that makes up a squad, but Arsenal's investment is still relatively low compared to some of the other clubs with whom that they consider to be their peer group. Chelsea's squad from their accounts is probably somewhere in the region of 1.6, 1.7 billion. Arsenal's is probably no more than half that.
I have to say, and I'm sure Graeme picked up on this as well, it's very depressing that you've spoken to someone that works at a football club whose view is, we don't want to pay those bonuses to win the Premier League. We're better off to come second or third. That's not a football person.
That's an accountant.
I just thought me and Kieran are speaking to very different people at these football clubs.
Yeah, absolutely insane. Graeme, talk to us about this Arsenal side. There's been a lot of pressure on Mikel Arteta and the way that the team has evolved over the last few years and the criticism of finishing second. But they've now gone 7 games in all competitions where they've won and not conceded a goal. Is this destiny? Is this Arteta's team being built? Is this what we should have expected? Or at some point, like all teams, will the wheels come off just a little bit?
I don't see the wheels coming off at the moment. But then again, I probably said the same about Liverpool 6 weeks ago. I think Arsenal could be building a dynasty here under Mikel Arteta. If, as expected, to get Bukayo Saka to sign his new deal in the coming weeks before January, which we think will happen. I think they're setting themselves up for, a decade of success here. They really are. They are. The squad building they've done. Andrea Berta's coming. It's been such a slick transition from Edu to Andrea Berta. It's been fantastic for them. The way they're operating now. Josh Kroenke, the owners, seem more on board. The fans are happy with the owners. Fans are always happy when they're winning, aren't they? It's no surprise there. So everything about Arsenal is coming together, both off the pitch, on the pitch. I think there's a real chance of an Arsenal dynasty coming here.
If that's the case, Kieran, how easy is it from a financial perspective for them to keep that going? Because if people start moving on, at some point, some of the players will move on. How difficult is it to maintain it if we've got some sort of Arsenal dynasty?
Well, you can create a virtuous circle. Making that qualification for Champions League places, instead of 1 year in every 2, if it becomes 4 years out of 5, the financial advantage that it gives you is significant. It also makes the club more of a magnet. Whilst I absolutely agree with Graeme in the sense that I clearly talk to the wrong people at football clubs, football players want to win things. So if they've won the Premier League, if they've made the finals stages of the Champions League, then that's a club which becomes attractive to other players, because when you reflect on your career and you look back, it's not going to be you don't stick your pay slips up against the wall. You stick your trophies and your caps and your mementos of achievements. And that's what the players are looking for. So once you start that momentum, it does become possible to maintain it. At the same time as Liverpool are finding this season, retaining the Premier League is not easy. So I think it will be fascinating should Arsenal continue this level of form. And I was at the Emirates last Wednesday, and when in the second half they bring off the bench Rice, Gabriel, Tombra, Trossard and Saka, you realise that's a pretty strong squad. They do look in a so you use success to generate success. It won't be easy, because we have seen substantial investment from those clubs who have got financial backing from people for whom the finances are a non-issue. But it can be achieved. And they do have the London factor as well, which is attractive to sponsors, it's attractive to players, it's attractive to many stakeholders in the game.
Depressing for everyone that isn't an Arsenal fan, I suppose. Anyway, Liverpool back to winning ways. But, Graeme, I want to come to you straight away on the body language of Mo Salah. Obviously, he did score, but it didn't do a great deal to earn that goal with Emi Martinez just giving him the ball and an open goal. What do you think is going on with Liverpool? Are you impressed by their performance? Do you think this is a step in the right direction?
So, yes, I'm clearly getting the win is a step forward for Liverpool after their 6 domestic defeats in a row. Mo Salah just set himself such a high standard. You know, Liverpool were decent at the weekend. They beat a decent Villa team who are on a good run of form. But yeah, he's clearly, there's a frustration there for the whole side, isn't there? They're not quite there yet. And yeah, it's just a player with very high standards, I think. You know, I think we would be discussing, he came off all beaming, think everything's fixed now. It wasn't, and it isn't. So, no, I love Mo Salah, and I think, you know, he wants Liverpool to get back to the very top. He knows it's a long old trek they've got to catch up with Arsenal. And, yeah, I just think it's that. He knows Liverpool are not where they should be or want to be.
So we shouldn't be speculating into his future or anything like that, you don't think?
Yeah, I did write a piece last week, just confirming that his offer from the Saudi Pro League is on the table. It's still there. They're prepared to offer him Cristiano Ronaldo type money, 150 million a year, tourism ambassador, stake in the club, whatever he wants basically. But you know, and he will end up in Saudi. He wants to go there. He wants to be this ambassador for Muslim footballers around the world. And it's really admirable what he wants to do. And he will end up there. But yeah, at the moment, I don't think he's going to end up there. Definitely not in January, Sam. Will he end up there in the summer? I don't think so, but let's see how it plays out. It's a long season ahead yet for Liverpool and Mo Salah.
Well, because also one part of this is not to make this whole thing about Salah, but his responsibility was so important to Liverpool last season and every season really since he's been there. However, it's so clear now that his role has changed and the responsibility is spread. And football players, as we know, especially the elite ones, tend to have enormous egos. Wildly similar to podcast hosts.
Yeah, he is that. Not to bring the tone down a little bit, but I do know Mo Salah was massively impacted by the loss of Diogo Jota. He was very close to him. And I do think it's interesting, I'm guilty of this as well, that we don't realise what Liverpool as a squad went through when they lost Jota in the summer. And again, on top of that, Harvey Elliott, another player who Salah's very close to, he moved to Villa. So Mo Salah's had to go through a lot of things off-field as well. I would like to put that out there. And to come back to the level he is at now, he's an absolute superstar. And I must admit, I don't think as a Premier League as a whole, we really push Mo Salah enough. I don't think he's ever been, you know, pushed to that place of being the best footballer in the world. And at times last year, he was.
I think you couldn't argue with that, could you? He was absolutely phenomenal. But I suppose for him, he lost out in those key moments like the Champions League where people then used that to fuel those debates. Kieran, if we're talking about Mo Salah, let's talk about his contract, which we're led to believe is heavily performance mandated. I don't know if that's the correct legal terminology. For Liverpool, if he's not performing, how big of a problem is it financially or for his camp?
He will still be on a significant base salary. But I've been fortunate enough to have been given a few contracts of elite footballers in the recent months, and the degree of depth to which they go into is very much on an incentivization basis. That's effectively the club saying that we want you to share in our success and vice versa. As far as Mo Salah is concerned, provided Liverpool finish in top 4, top 5 and qualify for the Champions League next season, then the vast majority of the things will crystallise. What we don't see as often these days are contracts where players are being given additional rewards for scoring goals or assists, because there is a feeling, especially sort of in modern football, where it is so linked up, that we want the players to focus on team success rather than individual success. By all means, if they qualify or they're mandated or nominated for the Golden Boot or FIFA Player of the Year, then there could be additional payments if they achieve things with their country in terms of a certain number of caps. Again, they might have some form of reward there, but it's mainly to do with getting into Europe. And I think, sort of going back to what Graeme was saying in terms of where will he be next year, if Liverpool are in the Champions League, I suspect Mo Salah will want to be there. If Liverpool are not in the Champions League, and he's signed a 2-year deal, is my understanding, what's the benefit of him staying at Anfield for a year in which he's only playing Premier League football, and probably one of the what players consider to be, and certainly the financiers considered to be, one of the minor competitions.
I like that came from very much a Brighton perspective. Kieran, I want to pick you up on something you just said there, which is that you've been looking at some players' contracts. So this is a slight tangent, but you're one person who will know this and better tell us. If we talk in the media about a player earning £100,000 a week or £200,000 a week, broadly, is that accurate, or are these contracts much, much, much more complicated than that?
I always take with a large dose of salt the figures which are discussed in the public domain. Sometimes a £200,000 a week contract could be, if all of the boxes are ticked, in terms of you will get a base salary, plus you will get an additional amount of money if you start a game. If you start on the bench, you'll get so much money if you are brought on in the first half, so much money if you're brought on in the second half. Then there are rewards which are linked to team performance. So certainly I know at Brighton, their target is to finish in the top 10. And everybody, including, to be fair, the tea lady, gets a bonus if the club finishes in the top 10. So yeah, take these things with a degree of healthy skepticism. But the biggest bonuses that I tend to see are Champions League qualification, especially at the elite end, because 6 into 4, 7 into 4, whatever you want to say, doesn't go. So players are very heavily incentivized there. And secondly, image rights. The clubs want the players to be working with the commercial partners, and there are certain clubs with certain players who will be contracted to say, well, you have to, along with every member of the squad, has to do a minimum of 2 appearances with one of our sponsors. If you choose to do more and you're right at the top end, then you will be rewarded for that. And often then the sponsors will give further bonuses should the club achieve success in terms of it's winning trophies, because that's what the sponsors want. They want their product alongside this elite athlete, alongside this big piece of metal.
Metal is nice. Thank you. Right, we better get Mark's view, because there was a lot going on in that one.
The grappling inside, which we've saw many times in Premier League matches, in the Liverpool-Aston Villa game with McAllister and Onana. I thought it had stopped a little bit, especially with the VAR threat that players can be punished. And, referees can go in and warn players, which we've seen. People get upset about that, saying it's delaying the game. However, prevention's better than the cure by awarding a penalty kick or a red card. So sometimes referees like to prevent the situation and try and manage them situations. This one is a strange one because it starts off a bit of pushing, and I can deal with that as a referee. I can, if 2 players are pushing each other, you certainly can issue a yellow card, of course. But I think most referees in the Premier League would manage them situations. But what I think Onana does is he goes one step further, and I think he hugely ran the risk, and I wouldn't have been surprised because he put that hand on the throat. If he's pushing in the chest, then we can manage them situation. But when a player puts his hands around another player's throat and towards the neck area or the head area, then he's massively running the risk of turning that situation into something more. And I think Onana is very, very fortunate that this action wasn't dealt with severely by the referee, because I think this type of challenge should have been a red card, because this sets an example across all levels of football that players can put hands around people's throats, and then what could happen is that action can lead to other things, and then other players are sent off or other players are given yellow cards because of that action, because there's a retaliation, because putting your hands around somebody's throat is not acceptable. So and I think the VAR should have recommended a review, because this for me is an act of violent conduct, and this is a one that frustrates a lot of people. because you can defend certainly pushing in the penalty area, but you can't defend putting your hands around somebody's throat because that's an act of violence. So for me, this should have been certainly a red card, and I would have preferred that the VAR interfered.
Okay, we will move on because we're getting through the time, aren't we? Nottingham Forest drew 2-2 at home against Manchester United. Heading into this one, it was Manchester United running on an unlikely run of form. 3 wins in a row in the Premier League, including that win at Anfield. Graeme, they were winning, and then it sort of all went wrong. Talk to us about what Ruben Amorim was doing right, and then what was going wrong.
Yeah, well, obviously, first of all, I thought Nottingham Forest were robbed in this game, Sam. Just put that out there.
What by?
The linesman. The linesman who came on the pitch, who if he did accurately see that, he should be working for NASA or something, or doing something spectacular with his scientifically magnified eyeballs, because how he saw that ball was out. Yeah, I'm sure you agreed with him, Sam. I thought Amorim, they're playing with belief now. I think United, the fact that Casemiro it's strange that when he's playing well, it's no secret, is it? When he's playing well, the team are playing well because he's playing that role which United are often lacking, that pivot in midfield, the protection for defence. Yeah, I think they're a threat now. That's the thing with United, they really are a threat. And Ahmad playing, he's not a right wing back. I know a lot of United fans don't like him playing there, but he plays that role under Amorim very well. And that goal was so absolutely superb. I love him as a player. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, United, they're getting there, aren't they? Week in, week out, they're progressing. It's still not there, not the finished product. But when they do have someone in there, like a Casemiro, playing that pivot role, it does make the whole team work. It makes them tick that much more effectively. Bruno, yeah, he keeps on doing his thing.
Do you think, Kieran, to build on what Graham's saying there, United are now in a period of perhaps they're still having to deal with a lot of mad spending over the last 10 years of a really strangely assembled squad, but just trying to offer some consistency and maybe trying to spend less manically?
I'm not so sure it's less manically. If you take a look at the level of expenditure in the first summer under INEOS, when Dan Ashworth was at the club, it did seem to lack joined-up thinking. I'm not necessarily certain that accelerated his departure from the club or that of Ten Hag. But I just look at the numbers. I think the legacy issue for me is that the expansion of Manchester United's expenditure over the past 2 or 3 years has very much been dealt with via the club's credit card. And they now owe in the region of £400 million in unpaid transfer fees to other clubs for legacy purchases, some of which are still at the club, some of which aren't necessarily at the club. They are players who have gone out on loan. And that does cause a cash flow issue for the club. So all of the nonsense that we heard last year about the redundancies having to be made because they couldn't afford to pay the tea lady was nonsense. It was due to the fact that they'd been buying sort of blind to a certain extent. And this does show that a club with the stature of Manchester United feels the need to spend, whereas other clubs, and Liverpool did this in 24-25. Liverpool didn't spend more than a couple of quid, and yet they won the Premier League. They weren't under the same level of scrutiny. The biggest misconception in football, in my view, is that spending money brings success. Spending money well brings success, and I think that key word, I always go back to this. Since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, Manchester United's gross spending is somewhere in the region of just short of £2 billion. But with the exception of Bruno Fernandes, how many of those signings have been outright successes?
Yeah, incredibly well said. If we talk about the spending just for a moment, and then I think, Graeme, it'd be great to get your view on what Dyche has done to Forest, because obviously they've been dreadful all season, loads of different managers, and actually they fought hard and earned themselves a point. Could you think some clubs spend because there's a taste for it and it's a part of the branding, like the transfer window comes around and it's this big pantomime, so they want to feed the fans?
It has become a cultural phenomenon of football. And I've certainly been aware of some directors of football and managers getting giddy at the thought of spending money, because it's a bit like when your gran used to go and take you to a toy shop when you were a kid. You weren't sure what you wanted to buy, but she said, this is how much you got to spend, and you just went round. I've got to come away with something. So, but budgets are a double-edged sword in the sense that they do potentially instill financial discipline. But if you say to somebody, you've got a budget of £200 million, it doesn't become, it becomes a target rather than an upper figure. And if you spent the money better, you could spend half of it and on more laser focused spending, but then you'll be seen to be unambitious, because the word on the street is that United could have spent 200 million, they only spent 100 million. And then we move into scapegoating, which is such a feature of modern football. Whether it's the owner, the director of football, or the manager themselves, somebody will get the blame, and that starts to snowball.
So Graeme, Sean Dyche, what did he do that made Forest better, in your opinion?
I'd just like to say, Sabutio was the first day it came when my nan was taking me to the shop, and I've got a bit over my shoulder there. I like what Sean Dyche did with his team, Sam. He reverted to that brilliant back four, anchored by Milinkovic and Murillo. Murillo was superb in that game, wasn't he? But Milinkovic next to him. It was so strange when Ange came in. The strength of that Forest team was that the centre-half partnership. Two of the best signings from last season. And Dyche must be rubbing his hands. He's coming there, as I've said before, the best team he's ever had. He started with Anderson and Louise. I know Louise went off early, but he was thinking, wow, I can't believe I've got this squad under me now. It's one of the best I've seen. And Doy, one of my favourite signs of the summer. I think this Forest team is on the up and up. It's a great chance he takes them towards the mid-table. I'm not going to say top 10, but I think it's the Forest. I don't consider them relegation candidates now under Sean Dyche. I think they'll be that good. I think the 1-11 is that much better than everything in the bottom half of the table. It really is strong. I think it's just a big organisation. So it's probably similar to what the players heard under Nuno. So it's not going to be massively far away from what they used to. And that'll be the key to it. They've got one of the best squads. And it's got better over the summer, They've added Douglas Luiz. They've added Dan and Doy. Igor Jesus looks a cracking sign up front, the Brazilian. So, yeah, I don't think Sean Dyche and Ian Warne et al. Will have too much work to do to get them up the table.
Okay, thank you. Let's get Mark's opinion on that game. I don't think there were any controversial refereeing decisions. Nothing for him to talk about in this one. I can't think of a single instant of the ball being out of play before a goal was scored.
I know that the Nottingham Forest coach, Sean Dyche, was very critical of the decision at the end of the match. Of course, everybody will say that it was a corner kick and it still needs to be defended. However, Sean Dyche makes a valid point about this should be where VAR should be allowed, even though it's not allowed at the moment under the protocol. I believe that VAR should be allowed to interfere in these type of situations. What's probably compounded the decision and the error is that the assistant referee has made this judgment from 70 yards away. Therefore, he clearly certainly didn't have the best view. He's made a judgment call. He's guessed, which is not what referees and assistant referees should be doing. If there's a doubt, he should have played on. Missed corner certainly is better than a corner given and a goal scored, because if he even allowed the play to continue, then there could be the debate if it's in or out. But because he's given it and it's clearly in and it's led to the corner, that's led to the goal, it's a big talking point. So assistant referee shouldn't have made that judgment call from such distance, with a lot of things in between the goalpost, players, the speed. The referee was better positioned but didn't have the right angle, so I can understand why the referee hasn't overruled the assistant referee's judgment. But certainly a very poor call from the assistant referee, which has cost Nottingham Forest and there's certainly the opening goal. Yes, they should be able to defend the corner kick, of course. However, it shouldn't have been given in the first place.
Okay, so we're going extra long today. Let's do Spurs versus Chelsea. Thomas Frank at home, booed off at full time. Graeme, what's happening at Spurs?
It's so strange. Spurs put in one of the best Premier League displays I've seen all season in many years when they went to City and won. That midfield of Bentancur, Polina, and Salah, which we saw again at the weekend. But I don't know. I think he's tinkering a little bit too much, personally. Yeah, I think let's not forget he's come in the summer. He had such a good start at times, and they came into a game. Were they second or could have gone second with victory over Chelsea? I think that flattered him to a certain extent. And yeah, I just think Thomas Frank is getting used to the squad. He's getting used to the players. He doesn't know what his best 11 is yet. But hey, he's not the only manager in the Premier League at the moment who doesn't know what the best 11 is. And I think it's just that. I think Frank's a tremendous manager. He's a tremendous appointment. I did quite like what he did. I don't know if Kieran will agree with this. What he did in midweek where he put Polina into centre half. I think that was a little shot across the bows of the owners saying I need a centre half in January. Because I'm playing Polina there. I thought it was quite clever what he did there. But yeah, I'm not going to be too harsh on him, Sam. I've seen some real highs and some real lows here. I think Thomas Frank will get it right at Tottenham, but it might take another few months before they see the end product.
Okay, let's look at Chelsea, Kieran. So we talked about Declan Rice earlier, but now Casado and Enzo Fernandez, both hugely expensive football players, and both a bit like Declan Rice. Are we now seeing the best of them after a little bit of, let's say, instability at Chelsea?
Yeah, I think they're in a slightly different position. That when they both joined Chelsea, both were very young. And, Caicedo had only had one season at Brighton where he'd been a regular. Fernandez had come from South America to Portugal, and then again he was only there for a few months. There's an awful lot to take on, and distractions of World Cups and so on. So it has taken them time to acclimatise. Anybody that saw Caicedo, and I did clearly, in that season at Brighton, thought, well, this is a talent which is far too good for a club of that stature, and it was really a case of where he was going to go. I think the problem with Chelsea is that because under the new owners, they have taken a scattergun approach to player recruitment, and they've used the player trading model as a fourth arm in terms of their revenue generation, along with ticket sales, broadcasting and commercial. But I don't think the players quite knew what was expected of them. And if that's not being communicated, then that's going to reflect on the pitch. But yeah, they're both purring like Rolls Royces at present.
Right, as time is moving on, we'll get Mark's view on that one.
With a challenge from Bentancur on Reece James. I've heard many comments over the weekend where this is an orange challenge. I'm not sure what an orange challenge is. It's either yellow or a red card. And when you analyse the differences between the yellow card and the red card, for sure that there needs to be some speed, there needs to be some malice, there needs to be some force, which certainly can endanger the safety of his opponent. In this case, Reece James. I believe that this is not a foot-on-foot challenge. This is a more on the ankle. And you can clearly see Reece James's leg certainly bending because of the challenge, which means there's a bit of force being used. And I wouldn't have been very surprised that the referee give this type of challenge, certainly now within the Premier League, the way now that they protect football players. This has been, the criteria of referees being strong on these type of challenges for the last few years. So I wouldn't have been surprised that the referee had give this type of challenge. And I just wish, this is the type of situation where I can understand why the VAR hasn't interfered, because he believes that, there's some element of doubt, and therefore he doesn't want to re-referee the game. And I can understand that. I don't want VARs to referee the game. So I can understand why the VAR hasn't interfered. But I think I would prefer that the VAR, allowed the referee to re-see that incident again, because only the referee can see the ferocious side of the challenge, the force of the challenge. Only he can see that on the field of play, not the VAR who's in an office in Stockley Park. And I believe that with that information, I think the referee could look at the screen and see the point of contact and then make that judgment call. Even if he went, I'm still sticking with my yellow card, I can understand that. But when I look at that challenge, I think this is a type of challenge I wouldn't have been surprised it would have been a red card. And certainly the VAR wouldn't have interfered anyways, because there's a lot of elements to leaning towards me saying that that's a red card. And then the third incident is
Okay, so now the last bit of news for us is that it looks like, definitely Victor Pereira has been sacked by Wolves and that Gary O'Neill is returning. Graeme, talk to us about that. How much chance do you think there is for Wolves to survive? Obviously, it's been a dreadful start to the season. They're on 2 points. Did they leave this too long?
They had to leave it at a certain point because the manager only signed his new contract about 40 days ago or something, remarkably. Although I would say stunning movement by his agent there, Jorge Mendes, who at the time, if you think back, he was being touted for the West Ham job and then he got a new contract. So excellent play by the agent involved there. In terms of Gary O'Neill, excellent news for Middlesbrough fans. Rob Edwards isn't being lured back to the Black Country in Molineux, so we can breathe a sigh of relief there. Gary O'Neill's going back in just over 12 months after he was fired. Can he keep him up? I think the big thing here, Sam, is the 3 promoted teams are of different calibre to the 3 we saw last year. It's going to be a lot harder. I think they're capable. I think Gary O'Neill plays some wonderful football at times. He really does. But it's going to be touch and go. I think he can, but I wouldn't put an awful lot of money on them staying up at this point. But the Wolves are a strange team. They're a talented bunch in there. You know, João Gomez and Andre in midfield are really, really good. Strand Larson up front. I think they are capable, and I'll probably err towards them staying up now.
Kieran, if you're Wolves, if you're running the ship, at what point do you go, okay, we're making our decision, and our decision is we want to survive, or is there a potential, especially after 10 games, is it consolidation and planning for relegation? Because that's a big financial conundrum.
With 28, 29 games remaining, you're always planning on a strategy which is going to allow you to participate in the Premier League next season. Even though we are now living in the era of parachute payments, your TV money is going to go down from somewhere in the region of 110, 115 million pounds to around about 40. So rolling the dice with a new manager, given that there's a 70 million pound shortfall next season, if you get it wrong, seems like a price worth paying to many owners, even though it's often the owners and their failure to invest and their failure to have a coherent strategy, which is the problem rather than the manager. Managers become scapegoats because that's part of football in modern life. They're not given a chance. When we've seen already quite a few dismissals up and down the divisions.
What's your view of the Wolves model under Fosun? I mean, the fans were chanting that they wanted them gone yesterday.
Well, I think the fans have been anti-Fosun for some time. I went to Molineux probably about 4 weeks ago, and I don't want to stereotype here. People from the Black Country specialise in being lugubrious at the best of times, and this wasn't the best of times as far as Wolverhampton Wanderers were concerned. And chatting to some of their fans in the pub, they'd given up on this season, and very much their ire was directed towards Fosun. They feel that Fosun are looking for an exit route, but aren't willing to come out and publicly say so, and therefore that's manifested itself in the lack of investment. And I always use a house analogy. If I'm planning to sell my house, I'm not going to go and put on, I'm not going to go and paint the bathroom or put in a new kitchen because somebody else is going to benefit from it. So you can see perhaps why that direction of travel has been the case. There's mutterings towards certain agents having undue influence over the club's recruitment strategy as well, which, provided the players are good that are being recruited, is seen as a positive. When the players are being a bit more hit and miss, becomes less so.
All right, guys, I will say thank you to both of you because this has now been a nice long episode. If you are ever thinking about buying Kieran Maguire's house, be aware he will not have painted his bathroom. You'll be getting the old bathroom. Graeme, thank you very much. Kieran, thank you very much. If you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. We're trying to hit 2,000 subscribers by Christmas. We'll see you next time Beyond the Back Four.
Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.